Thank you all. And now to the main event. And to help continue that legacy of cons that we've heard so much about, we're thrilled to announce that James Baker is the 2018 recipient of the Con Hogan Award. Jim has spent much of his career tackling difficult challenges head-on. After retiring as a colonel from the Vermont State Police and serving as its director from 2006 to 2009, he was named interim director of the Vermont Police Academy and successfully worked to restore stability and respect to the struggling institution. Colonel Baker then served as police chief in Rutland, cleaning up a department dealing with scandals and accusations of racism. He worked openly, and you've heard tonight a lot about this, collaboratively with other community leaders on Project Vision, Rutland's grassroots effort to address the opiate epidemic, empower the community, strengthen neighborhoods, and reduce crime. Other communities in Vermont are looking to learn from Rutland's successes. Jim was nominated by Green Mountain Power CEO Mary Powell, who is here with us this evening. In her nomination, Mary noted, James Baker is a fierce and inspirational leader who combines compassion, transparency, data, and just the facts frankness to build community pride and get results. And when she learned that Jim had been selected, Mary added, you hear a lot about problems, a lot about people getting together to consider them, but in too many instances, there is no mojo behind the work. With Jim, you actually get positive results. He is not afraid of radical transformation. And those of us on the committee were pretty impressed, kept coming back to that radical transformation. All of us felt that, like Con, Colonel Baker is effective at making a difference by building coalitions, being unafraid to have the tough conversations, being transparent and understanding, and applying data to achieve targeted results. He has a vision and the compassion and charisma as a leader to inspire others to work together to make that vision a reality. Cheryl informed Con about Jim's selection shortly before Con passed. He was thrilled with the choice, stating, I read Mr. Baker's material. You folks have made a tremendous choice. Combining vision with data and leadership and getting results doesn't get any better than that. You got that right, Con. We are thrilled to present the 2018 Con Hogan Award to Colonel James Baker.
Thank you. Good evening. Heidi, thank you for that kind introduction. Sister, I got a little nervous. I'm the product of 13 years of the Sisters of St. Joseph, and if they knew I was standing here now, they'd be very concerned. Well, thank you. That introduction is greatly appreciated. Thank you. I want to thank Mary Powell for nominating me for this incredible honor. Mary, you are a friend, an inspiration, and a phenomenal leader, who I am very fortunate to have met during my time in Rutland. To Steve Costello and Kristen Kelly from Green Mountain Power, as I told both of you, I know your fingerprints are all over this. See, I had to use a little bit of my old detective to figure that out. But thank you very much for your support. I'd like to thank the Selection Committee, Vermont Community Foundation, and all those who have taken part in this evening's festivities. To my friends from Rutland, who many of them are here tonight, and Arlington and beyond, thank you for your support and friendship. It means a lot. Many of my family members planned on being here tonight, but we had a death in the family this week, and a very cherished uncle of ours passed away, so kind of derailed them being here. But my sister-in-law is here tonight, and I want to thank her. My family's been behind me in times of smiles and times of tears. And finally, to the person who really should be getting this award, my wife, Kim. Thank you for always being behind me and at my side, and sometimes behind me and pushing me forward. You are, hands down, the best lifelong partner anyone could ask for. I love you. In your life, you will likely never meet someone as dedicated to public service as Con Hogan. This is a quote from the opening paragraph of a recent editorial in the Rutland Herald. The editorial was entitled Con Hogan. I'm deeply honored to be receiving the 2018 Con Hogan Award. To be mentioned in the same sentence as arguably the greatest public servant in our lifetime in Vermont is so humbling. To Mrs. Hogan and your family, please know how deeply I'm impacted standing here and the influence that Con Hogan had on me. I was looking forward to meeting Mr. Hogan at the luncheon, only to learn of his passing the weekend before. Although I never met him, I followed his career through state government and beyond. At the luncheon, I had the opportunity to meet with members of the selection committee and two of the three previous award winners. I was struck by how much Con Hogan influenced each of their lives and how deeply they honored and respected his work to change the world around him for the better. I thank you to the Hogans for sharing Con Hogan with the state of Vermont. I was working in my home office on a Wednesday afternoon a few weeks back when the phone rang. Ironically, I hate it when the phone rings. I looked at the caller ID, and the name appeared was Cheryl Mitchell. I thought to myself, another telemarketer, fund drive, someone for Kim. Since Kim was not home, I almost didn't answer the phone. When I answered it, Cheryl identified herself and told me I was selected as the 2018 Con Hogan Award winner. I was shocked. As she explained to me that Mary Powell nominated me and went on to describe the award, I was truly humbled. I am still humbled because in life accomplishments, things that matter, that get accomplished, do not happen without a cast of supporters. And that is my story. I have not woken up every day thinking of how I could position myself to win an award down the road. I had from very early on in my working career one single mantra that I had every day: make a difference for one person that day. At the end of the day, I think about who I did touch that made their day and their journey a little bit easier. This approach comes from being raised by Bill and June Baker in a little town called Hoosick Falls, New York. I lived in the same house with my mom's parents, Joe and Loretta Millett. I stand here today because of that upbringing and the incredible influence of my grandmother, Loretta Millett, who in all the years that I knew her, and I was blessed to be around her, I never once heard her say a foul word about anybody. She taught me, you meet people where they are, you pause to understand their journey in life. It's important to make a difference in someone's life today. In my house, we have a holiday tradition. We watch the movie, The Polar Express. Tom Hanks has so many great quotes in that movie that every year inspire me to move into the new year ahead of us to do exactly as I said, make a difference in someone's life. One of those quotes is this: sometimes the most real things in the world are the things you can't see. As a young Vermont state trooper, I would not have appreciated the depth of that quote. What I often saw was the worst of life that could be dished out in a given day. Family fights, hugging, holding the hands of those traumatized by violence, death notices to families that their children were killed in a car crash, and the list goes on. It would be easy to become jaded, cynical, or just plain angry. I tried my best not to be there because of another influence from the Polar Express. I still believe. I still believe in the goodness of people and the goodness of the world. And as time went on and I evolved to understand the world and the complexity of human experiences, I started to understand what Tom Hanks was saying. There were plenty of those moments in my Vermont State Police career, but one stuck with me. In March of 2004, a young lady by the name of Brianna Maitland went missing in Montgomery, Vermont. To this day, she has never been found. There's little doubt that foul play was involved. In the summer of 2006, I took over as the director of the Vermont State Police. At that point, Brianna had been missing for over 2 years. Her dad was pushing for more action on the case and demanding, rightfully so, that more be done. On a cold, damp, late autumn day, myself and then Major Tom Lesperance drove to the Maitland home in the St. Lawrence area near the Canadian border. It was a long ride from Waterbury, Vermont, but the ride home was even longer. I wanted to meet the Maitlands to hear their concerns and help address those concerns that they had. As we sat at their kitchen table, I learned from Mr. and Mrs. Maitland who their daughter was, what she meant to them, and how horrifying it was to go to bed every night not knowing where your child is. I still speak to Mr. Maitland on a regular basis. In fact, had breakfast with him a couple weeks ago. He still goes to bed not knowing where his daughter is. That experience had a profound impact on me and brought meaning to Tom Hanks' quote, "Sometimes the most real things in the world are things we can't see." From that day forward, I made a pledge to myself to work to see things that other people could not see. I started to see the possibilities of change, changing cultures, changing minds, and changing outcomes. As I moved through my time at the Vermont State Police to the Vermont Police Academy and being hired as the police chief in Rutland, Vermont in January 2012, I studied issues more deeply to understand how to bring systematic change. Data and outcomes became a big part of that. But the most significant experience I brought with me to Rutland was the deeper understanding of the human experience. What I found in Rutland was a community ravaged by opiate crisis. There was little that was not impacted. Our schools were dealing with the trauma brought by the chaos of families gripped with the opiate addiction. Neighborhoods were in chaos from those who struggled to survive. And our hospital was dealing with emergency room visits, chronic health care challenges, and babies being born to addicted mothers. Our crime in the form of property crimes, domestic violence, disorderly acts led to a community that felt unsafe and anxious. There was a lot of finger pointing at who was responsible for this. There were major challenges facing us inside the police department. But as that was unpacked inside the police department, there was a direct tie to how the opiate crisis was being perceived and the expectation that the police department was going to fix the problem. As time went into summer of 2012, there were players coming to our community who were peddling enormous amounts of heroin. In a 6-month period, working with state and federal partners, we seized nearly 16,000 bags of heroin in a 6-month period. I was often quoted as saying this situation was mind-boggling, and it was. What became very clear to me was that the police department wasn't going to arrest our way out of this crisis, and it was unfair to place the responsibility of fixing this problem on the backs of the police department. The more the community demanded the police to fix it, the more aggressive the police reacted. This led to a host of problems, to include lawsuits directed at racial profiling, and it is us against them bunker mentality. The quote that comes to mind as I reflect back on my days in Rutland is from Winston Churchill. "If you're going through hell, keep going." And that's exactly what we did. We kept going, but we took a different direction. We changed the narrative by measuring different outcomes than how many people did we arrest and how many drugs did we seize. We started a roundtable of community leaders, stakeholders, and organizational leaders to marshal resources. It became clear that the resources to address the challenge were in the city. They were in place. We needed a clearer picture of the impact of the crisis and where should we put our resources. We needed a new way of measuring progress. That was the birth of Project Vision. By tracking calls for service, we identified those locations that took the most resources of the police and started drilling into the root causes of why the police were being called to those locations. We applied every resource we had to address the issue at that given locations. As an example, we took blind data from the hospital, showing admissions into the hospital system. They showed the presence of substances in the patients. We did not use names, we used locations. That data was laid on top of police calls for service, and guess what? It fit like a glove. We did not always get it right, but we began to address root cause issues and change the narrative about Rutland, Vermont. The capstone of our effort was data measuring process known as RutStat. It was modeled after the legendary work of the New York City Police Department known as CompStat. Every 2 weeks, we reviewed all calls for service that required more than 3 calls to a given location. This was done in an open forum with all the partners in the room. In fact, the public was welcome to come. In order for us to raise awareness and hold group conversations about how to resolve the issues at given locations. What the result was, we often resolved issues without using enforcement activity, and we began to understand that it was not a whole neighborhood that was the problem. It was a specific location. This helped change the narrative, such as the narrative about the northwest section of the city being a bad section in town. It helped an effort is now just finishing up, rehabbing that section of the city. We saw pride come back. Once it started, it was contagious. All driven by data, measuring data, and identifying root causes from data. I often said at my time in Rutland, if you don't keep score, it's just practice. Keeping track of arrests and drug seizures were important, but it wasn't keeping score. And in this process, we were able to identify who was causing the most harm to the community. In a city of 16,700 citizens, by looking closely at data, we learned there was about 100 people causing most of the harm. Those folks got a little special attention and a little special prosecution. A special attention was given to domestic abusers. Our collective efforts also helped us convince the community to accept the methadone medical assisted treatment center. It was a game changer. I often get credit many times for the drop in crime in Rutland. It does not take a rocket scientist to know that if you put 300 people in treatment and they're not committing crime, your crime rate's going to go down. I could go on forever, but it's important to see the connection to data, creativity, creative thinking by all, collaboration, and community involvement. It was just not me, it was a collaborative effort. There are several people here who, if not in this equation, I would not be standing here. And they know who they are, and I run the risk if I acknowledge you and I forget someone else, but you know who you are. You know the work that went into this, and you know I didn't do it by myself. Again, I'm very fortunate to be standing here. I do not like this type of attention, as my wife Kim will tell you. But my grandma Millet taught me to be gracious and thankful. So thank you very much for this incredible honor. I will leave you with this piece of advice. It's important to get involved. Another quote from Polar Express reminds me every year, you need to be willing to take risks, even if you have no idea where you're going. And here's the quote. One thing about trains, it doesn't matter where you're going. What matters is deciding to get on. Thank you very much.